Do you enjoy the harvest of Missouri through food, fuel, or fiber? Interested in strengthening your community or making a difference in the lives of others? You're in the right place. This is Stand for Ag with Missouri Farmers Care. Join us for thoughtful conversations around the intersections of farmer, rancher, and consumer interests. Grab a seat, press play, and join the conversation.
Tell me something that usually really surprises people, because I don't think most people, even in agriculture, know about Pioneer Forest.
Sure. So Pioneer Forest was established in 1951 by our founder, Leo Dry. He started buying land then, and in 1954, he bought out National Distillers Products Corporation. They were a barrel manufacturing company out of New York, and he roughly purchased about 90,000 acres, and at that point became the largest private landowner in the state. Today, Pioneer Forest is run like a business, but Leo and Kay, they donated their sole proprietorship of ownership into the LED Foundation in 2004, and we're roughly 144,000 acres of timberland in Missouri. So we're right here in the state. We account for roughly 2% of the total output of timber production in the state. That's a big number.
That's a huge number. So 144,000 acres in what counties? Give us a geographic footprint for your forest.
Sure. So we're in Dent County, Texas County, Shannon County, Reynolds County, Carter County, and Ripley County. So we're spread across 6 counties. Our biggest ownership is Shannon County. We have over 90,000 acres there. So it's pretty widely spread geographically, but it's all in the kind of south central Ozarks. Our land goes basically from just south of Salem to almost to Doniphan, which is close to the Arkansas line. We're about 30 miles from the Arkansas line. So we have staff that are scattered out all over in the respective districts, depending on what counties. A lot of our guys are local guys, so they were born and raised in the counties that they work in, which works out really well because they know the people, they know the culture, and so it just works really well having them there.
Those are some powerhouse agricultural counties. You're also surrounded, I would suspect, by a lot of Mark Twain National Forest.
Yeah, we
US
are.
Forest Service grounds.
We are. So U.S. Forest Service has around 1.5 million acres in the state of Missouri. They're a major producer of timber for our state. So we actually join them in quite a few places. A lot of people don't realize this, but the U.S. Department of Agriculture is the housing for U.S. Forest Service. So there is a link there. So it's actually part of Department of Ag.
Which is exactly how Jason comes to join us on the Stand for Ag podcast this morning. So we have met Jason through our work with Mo5, and we've talked about that on this podcast before, that Missouri Agriculture, Department of Agriculture, University of Missouri, and many other partners are coming together to find ways to continue to add value to Missouri ag products. So that came from a study that was originally initiated by the Lieutenant Governor in an executive order. And that food and beverage manufacturing study said, one, forestry is a powerhouse in agriculture in Missouri. And that helped us in commodity agriculture to feel like we needed to reach out, know more, and do better in supporting an industry that's already leagues ahead in some ways for adding value to the products that we're harvesting off Missouri's forest land. So taking a step backwards, Jason, we then met Jason through some working groups through Mo5. So tell us your role and your background at the LED Foundation and Pioneer Forest, because Jason stuck out very quickly as someone who was an expert in Missouri forest products management and the industry, and just has a good feel for what's going on industry-wide.
I'm flattered by your comments, and I'm truly flattered to be here this morning. So I came on with Pioneer Forest in 2008, January of 2008. I had worked on a bachelor's of science in biology with an emphasis in wildlife management and ecology, and I couldn't find a job. Back when jobs were hard to find.
Yes.
So I decided to diversify a little bit. And so I worked on a master's in forestry at University of Missouri, Columbia. And so I finished that through them, but I came on in Pioneer in 2008. And at that time when I came on, I was a forester. I did a lot of timber marking, timber sale administration, worked with logging crews, worked with a lot of our neighbors. When you have this much land, you have a lot of neighbors, and you've really got to cultivate those relationships. So did quite a bit of that. And then my boss, Terry Cunningham, was the forest manager at the time, and he retired, I think, in 2012. And I was promoted to his position. And so today I still mark timber. I'm only able to get into the field about a day a week, which I never would have dreamed. Being in forestry, I'd be doing more administrative work, but such is life sometimes.
Which is like, absolutely.
And, so today I oversee the operation of the forest. We have 8 field foresters, and counting myself, and we mark timber, do timber sale administration. We pay all of our bills through our timber management program. We also have several conservation ecological restoration efforts that we're involved in. And our timber management program is actually the driving force for being able to do those. So prescribed fire is an important component to ecological restoration in a lot of cases. And that's a very small part of what we do, but it is a really important part. And without having proceeds from your timber sale operation, we couldn't pay for those because they are a net cost, but they're really critical for this region and for our operation. I think a tie that could go into agriculture really easily is that forestry is not traditional ag production in the sense. However, I do know a little bit about agriculture. I'm not completely inept. And a lot of farmers, whether they're row cropping or cattle producers, they have land that's really not suited well for row cropping or cattle production. And there's actually programs out there through EQIP. I know a lot of guys do EQIP funding through NRCS, and you can have buffer areas along your row crops where you're doing quail management, some native warm season grass restoration, because they just don't produce for those producers. And there's also, I've got a little bit of land, and through the Farm Bill, there's actually forestry programs within the Farm Bill through EQIP that you can apply for to get timber management done on your forest. You can even have management plans written. So there's a lot of options out there available for people who are involved in agriculture, that every acre is not well suited for their ag program.
You know, we often talk, Davin Altoff, who's helping lead the work on Mo5, and I often talk about 2008 when you were coming on. My husband and I bought a new farm, and we did a managed timber sale from that piece of ground. It's mixed pasture and timber ground. You know, the meadows are grassy, the draws are timbered. And that timber sale, that was a good time to make a timber sale. That timber sale paid for about a fifth of the purchase price of that farm. And so it's absolutely a resource. We used a consulting forester. It was a positive process through and through. Did we have a little mess to clean up? Yes. But all in all, was it worth it? Absolutely. And I look forward to making the next timber sale off that ground to continue cash flowing the cows, which are a little weak right now. And so I think that this resource, as all of us in traditional commodity agriculture become more and more aware of forestry, we just want to help connect producers with exactly what you're talking about. EQIP programs through the Farm Bill. I'm not sure that I had any idea that there were EQIP, timber management programs available through EQIP. And just the resources available on our private lands that not only help us in, our cow-calf operations or our row crop operations, but then feed Missouri's forest products manufacturing industry, which we can talk about in a little bit, that is a powerhouse of agriculture and is always looking for more timber and more product to be able to grow.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. As landowners, especially farmers, they're looking to spend a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of resources, blood, sweat, and tears sometimes to acquire that land. And if you can look at every acre as being productive in some way, whether that's even for wildlife or timber production. I feel like you're really cashing in on the complete package, the complete value of your farm.
Yep. And when we did that sale, because it was marked and very selective, I was amazed to hear that in 8 years we'd be ready to go again. And, there would be more value there. And so our conversations are in part the epiphanies that we've had while talking through this industry and the opportunities that are there from north to south and east to west. We have timber resources absolutely across the state. The other thing that you and I talk about a lot, Jason, is how forestry and conservation go hand in hand. Agriculture is always working on sustainability, not only improving, chasing always improving our production footprint, our conservation, stewardship, and sustainability, but just that those management practices can go hand in hand. And the sustainability of the forestry industry is a good one to be able to tell as well, that people may not be aware of.
So Missouri has roughly 15 million acres of forest land in the state. That's about a third of our total surface area of the state. That's a lot of land. And, a lot of times we discount timber and trees and forests because it's just not very glamorous in a lot of cases. It's not some warm, fuzzy animal that you can really put your hands on, but it's a very important resource for the state. Missouri is the #1 white oak producer in the world. So we actually harvest more white oak than anywhere else across the country. Missouri supports over 41,000 jobs in the state of Missouri, $2.6 billion payroll, $800 million in taxes, $103 million of that is for state taxes. So it's a sizable enterprise, and it directly ties in a $9.7 billion impact to the state of Missouri. So it's substantial. Wow. I know we have a lot of ag producers, and I don't know where that lines up with traditional agriculture, but it's a sizable part of our Missouri economy. And also the other thing is that a lot of this production is coming out of the south central part of the state or southeast part of the state. That's where our concentration of timber is the highest, but it's also the most poverty stricken. So we're able to bring in resources and economic impact into these areas where there's just not a lot going on. So the timber industry is a huge part of these local economies in the southeast and south central part of the state.
Yes, when through our Agri-Ready County designation program, the Oregon County Commission hosted me on a tour, a flying tour of beautiful Oregon County, Missouri. And probably their biggest employers, what they wanted to highlight for me, there were some beautiful farms in a gorgeous valley, but it was 3 sawmills and the associated processing that went along with those sawmills that they were able to take me through. So you can see that as you hit, you're right, that south central, southeast part of the state. Ag, forestry, and local economies are intricately linked in those parts of the state. So tell us, for those of our listeners that may not know, tell us a little bit of the highlights of Missouri's forest products manufacturing side. Once we get it out and we've got loggers and sawmills and everybody involved in that side, how do we add value to those products coming off of our ag and forest lands?
That's a really good question. So we produce a lot of different products in Missouri. My chief forester, Brandon Kuhn, I'm familiar with all this, but he actually put this together for our board. But it's basically a flow chart of hardwoods. So hardwoods are going to be your deciduous species. So a lot of red oak, a lot of white oak. There's going to be some hickory mixed in there, but those are probably the big 3. So we have trees. They're round, and they go. The loggers will cut them into logs. A lot of our logs, probably the vast majority, they cut them into 8-foot, 8-inch lengths. And then they haul them to various places. Some will go to the pallet mill, some will go to a sawmill, some will go to a stave mill. Sawmills are probably the largest producer of wood in the state. They're going to produce that. If you just follow that line straight down, they're going to produce ties, cross ties, which are basically railroad ties that go into the rail industry. Grade lumber, which is going to go into hardwood flooring, cabinet grade wood, and blocking, some blocking, not a lot, but blocking is stuff that they're going to either use at steel mills. They'll use it on over the road trucking just to kind of block material into place so it doesn't slide off the load. Or some of it will actually be turned into pallet lumber too. Okay. From that, as they run that saw through those logs, and just part of the process, they'll debark it. They sometimes produce slabs, they'll produce wood chips, they'll produce cutoffs and sawdust just as part of that manufacturing process. All of that is sold. Very, very little of that actually goes to waste. So all of that is sold, even the byproducts. And then from there, they produce mulch, charcoal, firewood, pellets, which are, there's not a lot of pellets that are produced here in Missouri, probably some, but that's going to be for your pellets for heating fuel. And then fuel, a lot of firewood cutters, and we do sell some that go into pulpwood that goes into the paper industry. If you look at pallet mills, I mean, that's pretty straightforward. Pallet mills produce pallets or pallet stock. And then on the far right, stave mills. We have a couple of really big stave mills in Missouri. Independent Stave Company, which is, they have a stave mill just north of our office here. McGinnis Wood Products is another one. They're based out of Cuba, Missouri. There's some guys that haul up to there. But when you look at that Mo5 group, not only does that tie into forestry, but it also ties into the food and beverage industry, because stave mills are producing barrels, which are used in the wine and bourbon industry primarily. And so not only do we have a forestry tie there, but we've also got a food and beverage tie into that. Missouri is the largest producer of staves in the world. Independent Stave, as far as I know, is still the largest supplier of barrels worldwide. I think they have around 60% of the market share, which is tremendous. And they're based right here in Missouri.
That's awesome. So have I heard right that Kentucky bourbons and whiskey are probably aged in Missouri originated white oak barrels?
Yeah, that's true. A lot of them would be based in white oak barrels, no doubt.
So we love Missouri wines. It's another important element of our food and beverage economy, and we've focused on Missouri wines here on Stand for Ag before, but that's a whole nother facet of the food and beverage industry that we haven't talked about previously. So those wine barrels would come out of those stave mills as well, right?
They would. The biggest one for independent is probably going to be bourbon, but they do produce some wine barrels too. I've got some other pictures if you wouldn't care to look at them. This is looks like a northern red oak, but that's one of our foresters. That's a pretty amazing tree right there. It just shows part of the process of what we do when we mark timber. The spotted blue at the bottom of the tree is just a proof mark. So when that tree is cut, we know that it was marked for harvest. That's a typical log landing. He's got saw logs on the truck. That's going to go into your cabinet wood and your grade lumber and your cross ties for the railroad industry. That's pretty typical. It's we see most landings are going to look just like that. Yep. There's a sawmill, circle sawmill. There's a tree that's going through it. You can see the bark's already been peeled off of it, and they're running it through that circle saw. It's going to be produced, again, that's going to be producing your grade, your ties. Those are going to be the two biggest products that you're working out of. This is a quarter sawn. Oh, go ahead.
Oh yeah, just a quick question. So this picture shows, I don't know, a 2.5 or 3 foot probably diameter saw. Jason, that's a wild
guess. Probably a 3 foot diameter saw. It's actually, I bet it's bigger than that. I bet it's a 4 foot saw.
Okay. So Is this laser guided? This technology is amazing. So is this laser guided or is this human guided to make those cuts all the way down the log?
Well, it's a little bit of both. These sawmills, just like everything else, is becoming more sophisticated over time. Back 80 years ago, they had guys that were standing in the sawmill basically right next to the saw, and they would actually turn the log and help move all the wood around. Today, they don't have to do that. So this particular mill, they actually just did an upgrade on it, and it's got a computer system with lasers. It's got cameras that look down, and it can, some trees have a curvature to them, and it can calculate the curvature and then calculate which cut will be the most efficient and produce the most wood.
Yep.
You don't want to screw it up because you've got investment in getting that log to the mill. It costs you money to the landowner. It costs you money to cut it. It costs you money to haul it. So you want to maximize your profit. And so having these sophisticated systems really helps in the production on your output with your logs. These are railroad ties, just several stacks of them. All of those are 7 inches by 9 inch cross ties. So again, you're taking that round piece of wood and you're producing grade lumber off the sides, and then the center of it, you're going to get that cross tie out of. Those are probably all going to a facility in Reynolds, Mark Twain Forest Products, and they have a treatment facility. So they're going to actually treat those ties. They'll put a piece of metal on the end of it just to keep it from splitting, and then use it in the railroad industry. Interestingly, they've tried various different products for using in the railroad industry for cross ties. They've tried concrete, they've tried polymers, but wood seems to be the most reliable source. They flex a little bit when the rail cars pass over them. Their life is, it's pretty good. I don't know what the average age of a cross tie is, but they're fairly long lived after they treat them. And it's also, the thing for us is it's a sustainable wood product. So, even as those ties are removed and need to be replaced, we're constantly producing new wood in Missouri. Matter of fact, we grow far more timber than we ever cut across the state of Missouri. So it's a very sustainable product.
That is absolutely fascinating. I'm sure with the need to move freight across this country from our ports, that railroad industry, those ties are in high demand. I just traveled out west recently, and in that open landscape, you can really see rail cars go by. Along I-80, for instance, you can see rail cars going loaded with vehicles, coal, and all other sorts of consumer goods, day and night and day, the whole time that we traveled across the West. So.
Yeah, and the rail is a really efficient way to move products and goods across the country. It's very efficient.
Absolutely.
And of course, there's a pallet. We sell to about 7 different pallet mills, but there's pallet mills all across the state. So I think for now, that kind of gives a pretty good summary of different products that we have in Missouri.
So you touched on the sustainability, that what we harvest versus what is grown out there. Let's delve into that a little bit. I know that as with agriculture, sometimes those looking to market alternative products need to paint a story that our traditional production isn't sustainable. So think of alternative meat products, for instance, in the cattle world. I know that there are a lot of hardwood alternatives that you can that builders and contractors and homeowners can find. Tell us a little bit about Missouri's sustainability story, Pioneer Forest sustainability story. It's a great story to tell. I don't like when pressures are put on consumers, some sort of moral value pressure to put on consumers to think that there's product A and then somehow a superior, morally superior product B, that somehow a manufactured product is more sustainable than the trees that are growing on our landscapes, harvested by our Missouri neighbors and sequestering carbon throughout their entire lifespan. So can we talk a little bit about the sustainability of forestry?
Sure. I mean, trees are a renewable resource. In fact, when we think about our forests, especially on Pioneer, when we think about trees, trees are a plant. Whenever we do anything to manipulate plants, we're actually manipulating habitat for wildlife too. And so there's a direct tie with conservation and forest management. But our forests on Pioneer are certainly sustainable. We've been harvesting trees since 1951 when Leo acquired his first tract of Pioneer Forest, and we still do that today. Through that time, we've seen tremendous increases in our standing volume. Our growth rates have increased over time just because we have more trees. But we are really, for our mission, and just me personally, we've been charged with being stewards. You know, that's really what we are, and we've got to do our best to take care of the resources that we have. And Pioneer Forest certainly does that. So we harvest around, last year we harvested around 16 million board feet of timber on our forest, and that covered around 5,000 acres, which sounds like a lot.
Wow. But out of 144.
But we have 144,000. So we try to be on a 20-year cut cycle. And at 5,000 acres, we won't make it actually. So we'll be a little bit longer. But in 20 years time, let's say we are able to maintain that 20-year cut cycle. In 20 years, we'll be back to that same section of land. And we'll be back in there. We'll be doing another sustainable harvest. And basically we're trying to not only manage our forest, but we're actually trying to recruit new trees, young trees into our system. And so harvests are really an important part of our conservation work. In order for us to sustain that forest, to manage our forest, we have to do periodic harvest. And again, that drives all of our conservation efforts. We currently have several. Not only do we harvest timber, but Pioneer Forest and the LFD Foundation, we have 7 natural areas. We have 2 state parks, which include Dillard Mill, Grand Gulf State Park. And we have several conservation restoration efforts. One is Jerktail Mountain. It's an igneous knob where we use timber management and prescribed fire to help us manage a glade system. The Randolph Tract is a pine management unit. Pine used to cover around 5 million acres in Missouri. Now there's roughly 500,000 acres.
Wow.
Welch Spring has a globally significant plant species called tall larkspur on it. Highmont is another pine management area. And of course, our Roger Pryor backcountry is around 62,000 acres of one contiguous tract of land. And so it's sizable. When you look at sustainability, not only does it matter with your timber production and making sure that you have that constant supply, which is important to us, but also we talked about different economic drivers in the state. Well, for us, timber, tourism, and ag are the 3 big ones in our part of the world. Tourism is huge. We have Echo Bluff right now that's right next to Pioneer Forest. And we don't often think about this, but having a sustainable, if we want to call it that, view shed, because people are going to be coming not onto our land necessarily, but they'll be coming through our land and having something that's appealing and attractive to look at. Whether you like it or not, timber harvests, sometimes they're not sightly. We're using heavy equipment. We're putting trees on the ground. There's debris, there's slash, there's all kinds of stuff that's left behind. But given just a year or 2 or maybe 3 years, when you drive through it, then most people won't even realize that there's been a timber harvest done on our land. So we can have all of those components and continue to have a sustainable supply of timber. That meets our economic needs. It meets our social needs. It meets
wildlife needs. I know up here, quality deer management would say a mixed age stand is exactly what you want for deer and turkey. There's many things that benefit.
It is. There's just so many benefits to doing good timber management on forest land.
So one of the things that I like about Pioneer Forest is it's the same principles that we embody in our Missouri Leopold Conservation Award, is that we are highlighting, in that case, private working lands, but it is working lands is the emphasis of that, in
Sure.
that we are highlighting those that are prioritizing clean air, clean water, abundant wildlife, good conservation and stewardship practices, but are making a living from that land. And so what I like about Pioneer is that you do have parks, and you do take those areas into consideration and have a strong emphasis there. But you also have the, as you said at the very outset of our conversation, your expenses, the bottom line is underwritten by those timber sales. And so tell me a little bit about, I'm sure as a part of a foundation, Pioneer does a lot of outreach and education. What can Missouri landowners take from Pioneer's model and implement on our own private working lands?
Wow, I've not thought about that a whole lot. So what folks can think about whenever you compare your own land to Pioneer Forest? I mean, we are unique. I know that. We're part of our charitable purpose is to be a demonstration forest, and we feel like we do that very, very well. In some cases, clear cutting is recommended for various properties. That is not our choice to do that. I think for landowners, the thing that they should understand is that sometimes you have a choice. You don't have to manage your timber doing even age management or clear cutting. You can manage using single tree selection and still have a forest to come back to. You can do periodic harvest in your forest. Lots of folks, I mean, clear cuts are unsightly, they just are. But when you use single tree selection, again, you're going to have some impact from that operation, but you can still have a deer stand up in your forest. You can still create trails in your forest that aren't just going to brush in dog hair thick where you can't really walk through it. And then if you do it the right way, if you manage your harvest appropriately, you can come back after a period of time and you can do another harvest. And so you don't have to get all of your income all in one shot. You can harvest some of it, let the rest of it grow, and come back from time to time and have that periodic income flow. And that can help you fund other portions of your farm, or really, I mean, it's an asset that you can capitalize on from time to time. Use it however you want.
Yep, I love that. It may be a 10-year cycle, but just like we're, selling calves once or twice a year, it's that cyclical income stream that you're exactly right, can fund other investments or pay back into the farm.
Yeah.
So how do people follow Pioneer Forest? Those of us who aren't in your backyard, all of your neighbors, do you guys do outreach on social media and other avenues? How do people follow what's going on down there?
Well, we do have a website, ladfoundation.org or pioneerforest.org. That'll bring you basically to the same place. We don't actually have social media. We've got a very small staff. We've only got
because you want to be out marking timber one day a week, and that would be your day.
Yeah, when you start opening that can of worms, it's a lot to keep up with.
It is.
So, but those are both really good ways to just see what's going on with us. We also have an annual report that can be found online on our website, so you can kind of see what we've done on an annual basis. Those are probably the big things. The other thing is, when you get on our website, or if you're at Echo Bluff State Park, there's some information. We've got maps of our backcountry that are in there. We allow primitive recreation only on our property, so you can't be riding four-wheelers or anything like that on our private. We're a private company, by the way, and you cannot ride your four-wheelers and Jeeps down our private access roads. We just don't allow that. But people are free to access our land from county roads. We have several hiking trails that are on us over. They branch out from Echo Bluff, but then further into our backcountry, we've got the Highmont Trailhead, which it's got several loops. It's got the Brushy Creek Loop. It's got the Laxton Hollow Connector, and then the Laxton Connector actually ties into the Ozark Trail. So there's lots of recreational opportunities for people that want to just come out and enjoy what Pioneer Forest has to offer.
That's great. This time of year, I bet it is fantastically beautiful in the
It's
Ozarks.
beautiful. We have about
Yeah.
30 miles of current river frontage that's under scenic
Mm.
consent with the National Park Service. And so if you float from, essentially, if you float from Acres Ferry or Cedar
Mhm.
Grove
Mhm.
on down the river, undoubtedly you'll go past some of our land.
Yes, I bet many of us have been through Pioneer Forest and had no idea.
Probably
We
not.
we have an annual float. Our family takes an annual float just out of the Montauk State Park and heads on down the currents. So we probably pulling out at Acres. So we've been there through there many times, and undoubtedly we see wildlife, bald eagles swooping down over the river. It is just a wonderful place to be. So
It
you're pretty
really is.
blessed to get to hang out and live down in the midst of that beauty.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. Is there anything, Jason, that we haven't talked about that you wanted to visit on this morning?
You know, far and wide, our biggest part of our operation is our timber management program. And I think that's really an important asset to Missourians. And really our model of forest management. I think for a lot of people, it applies directly to the way that they would maybe like to manage their timber. But again, it's not the only thing that we do.
Yeah.
We have those 7 natural areas, 2 state parks. We have a lot of other conservation work that we do on the forest. And that's a really important part of our operation. And it's different than what our regular timber management is, but we actually are doing timber management in our conservation work to get the results that we need. And for ag producers, they can think about their timber asset in the same way, whether it's through EQIP, NRCS programs, managing those unproductive acres for timber management or for wildlife, or a combination of both. I really think that in a lot of cases that our timber resource on farms is really underutilized and maybe in some cases underappreciated, but it is an asset, and you can capitalize on having that asset on your farm and think about it differently, other than it's just acres that you can't use.
Absolutely. That's a great point. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a fascinating conversation. We will have in our show notes the links to find Pioneer Forest online, as well as the images that Jason shared with us today of the timber flow chart, and then some of those images of harvest and manufacturing, so that those listeners that want to tune in that way can go find those images. We are very appreciative to have this resource in the state of Missouri, and for you to have joined us and shared your expertise this morning, Jason. We just appreciate all that you do, and thanks for being a great partner within Missouri agriculture.
Thank you for having me very much.
Thank you for joining the Stand for Ag podcast with Missouri Farmers Care. We're excited to bring you new stories each week. We as agriculturalists have a lot of stories to tell. Stories of resilience, grit, and stories of families that are united by their passion for agriculture. Each week, tune in for a new episode and join the conversation.